my latest book is out, The Red Beast Anger Workbook, which is a companion guide to the most beautiful picture book, The Red Beast, which I'm sure many of you know. The workbook that I've collaborated with Kay and her son Hatham is a time saver. It's all the activities to do with children to support them to understand about emotions. It's teaching them about emotional regulations. But it has a beautiful new character called Danny who talks through what anger feels like, the power of words, like we're getting children to understand about swear words, perfectionism, winning and losing, all the ways that Kay and I have helped children understand anger and how to help them regulate it, how to reduce that anger. It's just fantastic. There is downloadable certificates and activities. And originally we thought you would have to buy one workbook for each child, but the way our publisher's done it, you actually just buy the book once and you can download the activities, the word finds, the Red Beast scale, that beautiful thermometer some of you would know I use in the emotional regulation course. Anyway, I am so excited. Please make sure you listen to next week's podcast where Kay and I are going to do a deep dive into explaining the book. But this week, I thought it would be worth revisiting Kay talking about the original book, The Red Beast, well, the revised and updated one that came out last year. The Red Beast has sold over 50,000 books. That is a lot of books. By the way, a bestseller is like 5,000. So this is a mega bestseller book. And I am so excited to collaborate with Kay, who is a teacher and parent, and Hatham, who is an amazing illustrator and is neurodivergent, and he is amazing. And I'm hoping Kay can do some video of Hatham doing some illustrations to put on my Facebook and Instagram. But honestly, working with both of them has just been an absolute pleasure, a real highlight for me. Having an autistic person illustrate a book would be, a life dream, and to collaborate with Kay and Hatham, so special. So I'm going to do a replay of the book on the revised and updated, why Kay revised and updated The Red Beast. Even though it was so popular, she really wanted to bring the language up to date, make it far more inclusive. And I think that even if you have the old Red Beast, I would recommend buying both the anger workbook and the latest revised updated book, because I think it's really important we keep up to date with language. And I really appreciate the fact that Kay and Hatham redid the illustrations, made them so much more inclusive, changed the language. That's really hard. I know myself as an author, going back to a book can be tricky. So anyway, the Red Beast Anger Workbook, make sure you listen next week because it is a time saver. I promise you, every school, every family needs both of these. If you know a child who, needs support to manage their emotions. Remember, never in the history of calming down has a child calmed down. In fact, I just got an email today from a school that uses zones of regulation and the neurodivergent child can't use them. Well, hello. Those zones were made for neurotypical children. We actually need to teach the child how to know their emotions, where it feels in their body. See, we're using our neurotypical brain to expect a neurodiverse child to understand and feel the same way. We actually need to teach this. And I know you've heard me rant about this before, but my question would be, what's the educational outcome? Can the child access the zones of regulation? Is it helping the child? Because the school that emailed me today, no, this child is ending up in the office every second day having massive meltdowns. That's because he's getting in trouble and he doesn't understand because no one's actually taught him about where anger feels in his body, things that make him angry. In fact, this book will be amazing for that little boy. I have told the school principal because he is a perfectionist. He is dobbing on everyone else for doing the wrong thing because his anxiety is so high, the smallest thing upsets him. So these resources are made for our neurodiverse children, but I think they're helpful for all children. Some of the schools I go into, I have used the Red Book for children with trauma, particularly if children live in a violent household. I have found the Red Beast actually really helpful for children to protect themselves, to understand that some people shut down, some people get angry and get loud, but also what do you do when people get angry? How do you protect yourself? Anyway, that's probably another whole podcast episode. I highly recommend, if you don't have these books, put them on your must-have. If you haven't already ordered the anger book, make sure you listen to next week's too, where we'll do a deep dive into how to use the workbook. Thanks so much for being a podcast listener. Can't wait to see you this term, by the way. I've got lots of dates coming up everywhere from Hobart to Queensland. Hope to see you soon. Hi everyone, welcome to the Sue Larkey podcast. As I always say, you have to embrace difference to make a difference. Let's dive into today's podcast. Welcome everybody. I am so excited to have Al-Ghani on the podcast again. She's my most popular visitor on the podcast. Kay's book, The Red Beast, has a new edition, and I posted it on Facebook and everyone was like, what's different? So I emailed the beautiful Kay and said, what's different? And she said, let me come on and tell everybody about it. So welcome, Kay.
Hello, Sue. Yeah, it's always lovely to be on your podcast, even though, I'm really nervous and I talk at like 100.
No, just pretend we're chatting like we always do.
I'm going to be more calm. I really am. And what a good question. Very good question, because the fact is, if you go on like Amazon now, the old, the original still selling well. So there's obviously lots of copies. And then you've got this new one, which doesn't really have much in terms of, people's recommendations, because it's literally just gone on there. So yes, why should they invest in the new edition of The Red Beast? Well, the first thing is that it's definitely more inclusive. Now, if you remember when we talked about the original book, I wrote that book for a particular child in a particular situation who had Asperger's syndrome. And so it was written for children with Asperger's syndrome in mind. And this new edition, we aim to reach most children on the autism spectrum. So we know the idea of a red beast is usually, understood by children with Asperger's. They don't really have a problem with that. However, and this has been a criticism of the original book, other children with autism may take that metaphor quite literally and become distressed at the thought of a real beast inside of them. And I always take note of what parents say and what teachers say. And that was a big deal for me, that although I'd gone through the National Autistic Society, they'd okayed absolutely everything, but it was aimed for children with Asperger's. In this new edition, I start off the story with a different sentence. Let's imagine that. At the start of this story, this means you can now, before you read it, discuss the idea of the beast as being not real. And ask the children, can you think of anything else that's imaginary? And I like to use that Makaton. So it's let's imagine. So I'll put a little picture of that on there for you, so that you've got a symbol to use for children that don't understand that abstract concept of let's imagine. So at the start of the story, so they can probably tell you about things like dragons and unicorns and vampires, because that's what's in vogue now. Are they real? No, they're imaginary. And then we can to reinforce this use of words. I went into school and I tried something out. I made an activity for the children called Let's Imagine That. And I'm going to post that for you with the visuals that Haytham really did for me, which is lovely, so that you could try using that at home or in the classroom before you even read the book. The second thing is that, as well as being inclusive, I'm just going to move that sign over there. The new illustrators are more inclusive of typical children. So the child has a chance. We know that when they're angry, they are not self-conscious. They don't see what everyone else is seeing. And in the original picture, we see only the red beast and the horror on the face of poor John. In the playground, there's no other children in the playground, nothing there. But if you go into the new book and look at the new edition, addition, you can see again the child, and we've changed, it's all been changed, with this group of children stopping what they're doing and staring in horror at what's happening on the playground. And then, you can gently remind children, because they feel so sorry after they've been angry, to think about that, because they can't see these children. They're not concerned with anyone except that rage inside themselves. So I like to think that the new illustrations are definitely more inclusive of how the perspective, if you like, that give the child a perspective from as what other children are seeing at that time. We also changed the character names to make them more gender neutral, which is obviously the buzzword now, isn't it? So we chose Danny and Charlie rather than Rufus and John. And the use of the name Rufus for a sort of angry red-haired boy now seems very much a cliche, which may have been okay when the book was first written, but now I think we would see it as stereotypical and therefore not very PC.
No. But I love that, Kay. I love that we have come so far, and I love that you have change that, and I love that you're thinking about that, making it gender neutral, and even the diversity in the pictures of the other children. Like I really love all these changes, and I think it actually is a lovely reflection of how far we've come in the last 10 years.
It is, and it was something that, because I've been in more recently, just pre-COVID, in 2 schools, because they'd asked me to do the Red Beast. They often do it with all the children in the class. I became acutely aware of these deficits within the old book, and that's when I got on to Jessica Kingsley. And I said, look, do you think we could do a new edition? Haytham has always hated those illustrations, because he did them for me so quickly, because I needed them, right away. I needed them for this child. And yet Jessica Kingsley at that time was very happy with the way they were, so they didn't want to change them. He's had to live with the fact he doesn't really like them. So he's much happier, especially if you notice in the book, they're all in a box.
Oh,
the others were done.
Oh, that is, now I am noticing that. That's adorable.
Yeah. And in the other one, of course, he just did it on A4 paper. So he'd had the A4 paper and filled the page. And that's what they took and, scanned it and put it straight in to the book. But here, he gets to put a box around it, which suits him just fine.
I love that. Over summer, I'm doing a sort of special series where I'm interviewing and talking to some people from everything from an expert on anxiety to a principal from Wales who is doing some really interesting things with play and children with pathological demand avoidance. So I'm just getting a hold of eclectic people on to talk. I find these really interesting conversations, so I'm calling them sort of summer conversations. So make sure you subscribe, because if you're away over summer or not looking at your emails, then you want to make sure when a new episode drops, they're just an opportunity to be a little bit eclectic, and not necessarily for teachers thinking about the classrooms or parents about parenting. I mean, they're just sort of, just some interesting people that I've come across who have doing some interesting work. And I thought, well, why don't we mix it up over January and over summer? And so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the podcasts. The other thing I would really love you to do is just take a moment to rate my podcast. You don't have to leave a comment, just give it a star rating. Just that helps other people find the podcast, so otherwise they don't know about it. And if you feel inclined, share an episode that you've enjoyed. Share one of your favorite episodes of this season, or the season, we don't do seasons, but favorite episode that you've enjoyed this year, because remember, the more we share, the more we can make a difference.
The other thing is, when I've been in schools and I've read this book to children, I've heard a few times, and I listen to these people's voices, that they don't like the picture of the red beast in the net being dragged into school by the teachers. They think that it's cruel, and it makes the adults seem aggressive and uncaring. And, I've been worried about that picture for years, because, lots of people don't see it, but a lot of children, especially the children that do get into trouble, they said they wouldn't like to be dragged in by a net, or dragged into school. And, of course, if you go on the playground, certainly when, this book first came out, that was often happening. Children were, being taken quite roughly off the playground. So it was a reality at the time, but obviously we wanted to change that. So if you look in the new book, you'll see now that Danny's being led into school using gentle handling. We call it Teen Teach here in England. I don't know what you call it. And so the adult's arms are wrapped around his waist, and they link arms with him. So that, that takes him in safely inside. And also we get to see poor Charlie being consoled, because he's upset about what's happened, didn't need to upset Danny. And another child standing there as well, watching it all take place, because that's what children do, don't they, in the playground. So if there's any action going on, they're looking at it.
I love it. And I love the way that you've got rid of the net. I had never noticed that, but now you've pointed it out. It makes sense. And
isn't it really how children can just see things better than us? And especially the children that I was talking to, because these were the children that, were getting into trouble in the classroom and on the playground because they couldn't control that anger. And they love the idea that, it's not really me. I don't want to be doing that. It is this red beast. But then, they take umbrage at the picture of in the net.
I love it. This is fantastic. These changes are so good. I love it.
And another reason for doing this, of course, I've mentioned about Haytham, because you know what? He produced those originals in 2004.
Wow.
Can you believe that? And it took maybe up to 4 years before it was published, the book. And I think you'll agree that these new edition pictures are much clearer, they're more colourful than the original, and yet they still retain that simplicity of the pencil crayon sort of medium that children, and that's what children really like. They like to copy them. They could relate to it, copy it, and do that. So copy those drawings and know that they could colour them in with just simple pencil crayons.
I love it. I love it.
So again, if you look at the original, if you go into the original book, you will see it's quite a nice sort of picture, but the one above, there's so much more information in the new book. The room he's going into, you'll see it's a special room. You've got some posters about yoga on the wall and getting a good night's sleep, all relating to the fact, this is what we need to do to make ourselves tranquil and calm.
I love it. I love it. So many more things to talk about in the pictures.
Absolutely, and that's I think you could probably talk about what we've been doing, because that's one of the most compelling reasons there is for reading to get the new edition of the Red Book. Come on, Sue, tell me your.
Well, it's been a little secret project, but the secret's going to be out now, Kay. So, as everyone in Australia and New Zealand would know, that I have been a big fan of this book for a very long time. And during COVID, I was lucky enough to work with Kay, and we've created the Red Beast Anger Book, and with Haytham. And it's a beautiful workbook to accompany the Red Beast, and it's just fantastic. And I'm so excited. I can't wait for people to have it, because I think myself and Kay have used it in that way for years, but a lot of schools weren't sure how to use it. So we've created a workbook where Danny talks through anger and talks through in a lot more depth and giving tools. But it's, how would we describe it? It's more of a, what was the words we used in the NK, like a challenge where he has little tasks.
Yeah, there's a set format, not to do too much at once, but we looked at all the different ways and reasons why children on the autism spectrum and children in general can get angry. And we're able to allow Danny in this very practical workbook, isn't it? Extremely practical, coming to terms with the reason for his anger, his angry outbursts, and learning ways that he can control his red beast. And within that, and you mentioned this about the new illustrations, we've included a number of black and white illustrations. I asked Haytham to make sure he kept copies before he coloured them in, so that we have black and white illustrations in this from the new edition that are excellent in discussion time. So the child's given the picture, he's colouring it in while you're talking about what's going on, what were the reasons, why did Danny get angry in the playground, all those sorts of things. So there's lots of areas that we looked at, and hopefully they'll be able to have a good look at the Red Beast workbook, something that is particular to a particular child. So teachers might want to, get a set of them and work through with a group. Or it can be done at home, anyone, granny, grandma, aunties, uncles, and we've included all the family within that workbook, their thoughts on, and the teacher's thoughts on, Danny and why he sort of
what I love too is they all talk about how they see anger. So each the grandparent and the uncle, they all share their own experience of anger, so that children can have a few different tools to understand anger. And then we've got things in there because Kay and myself have experienced, children who don't like making mistakes or children who swear. And we've got activities to help them understand that and give them the the terminology and understanding about their anger and emotions. And it's fun. There's lots of fun activities and ways that children will be able to relate to the book. I can't wait to see how children react to it. And I can see teacher assistants in Australia, and I can see them sitting with a group of children and working through it, and really then having language to talk to children, because I'm a believer in emotional literacy, and what we're doing is giving children that emotional literacy about their emotions and how to regulate them, but also all talking about it together, because we all have emotions.
Absolutely. And it is those big emotions that's the problem. I was so lucky. You and I got an email, didn't you, from the publishers saying, would you like to do something together? Because they recognised how brilliant your workbooks are and they like my stories, and the coming together of the two of us was just a great idea. And we could bounce off each other and look at different ways to do this. So we got a double, I feel like we're getting a double benefit.
I've loved it. Oh, it's been Kay, for me, it's been an absolute honour to do it together. I mean, you've sold 50,000 Red Beast books. It's incredible. So I feel like I've got to be working with an author who I love, and also we've got to produce something and make a difference. So it's exciting.
I surely hope so. It's certainly been fun doing it, and we're very proud of it, aren't we? And Haytham has been magnificent, because the number of illustrations he's done for us goes into the hundreds for this workbook.
I know. I feel like his name should be. I feel like in this book the illustrator should be up front, not the authors, because he's really just been directed by our ideas and
Absolutely, yes. And we keep asking for more and more and more. There are all these little black and white illustrations, and then ordering them and putting them in. Yeah, it was a big task for him, but thankfully he loves doing that. So that was
so wonderful.
Yeah. So the last thing I promised to give this to you, in fact, the whole thing that we've been talking about, so you can post it for your listeners, is this idea: how do I teach children with autism to imagine? So these are activities to promote the understanding of that concept of to imagine, to pretend, make believe, whatever you want to call it. So if you do the Macadam, you clap your two fisted hands together, and then this idea of curling the finger away from the brain to show let's imagine. Then you can use that with typical children, with everyone. So what you need to do, and I'll show you the activity cards in a minute, to cut them up, print them out, cut them up, and set up an area where the child has to move from one place to another. So it can be a small area, it can be a bigger area, it doesn't matter. It can be for a whole class, it can just be one child. And then you, as the parent or teacher or carer, choose a card at random, read out the card using that Maccathon time to imagine. So let's imagine that, and model the action, and then ask the child, after you finish, am I really a frog? So say you've been modelling a frog and you model the answer. No, I'm just imagining, or I'm just pretending to be a frog. So you repeat it. I love the repetition. So that first sentence in the new edition is let's imagine that. So engage then the children in the activities. And when you think they've understood the concept, then is the time to introduce the story of the Red Beast and ask, is there really a red beast inside all of us? Answer, hopefully they will say, no, we are just imagining
I love it. I love it. And I'll put that visual of how to sign. Let's imagine.
Yeah, I'll do that. That was the, I'm showing you it here, aren't I, on the screen? I've been zooming here. But that was the, I mean, I could ask Catherine to reproduce something else, but I think you're okay using 1 or 2 Makaton signs. I don't think they mind.
Oh, no, I think that's lovely. And
it would have been nice with the white. I might ask him to do it with the white background. That's all I could get. And I think it's because of copyright. It looks
yes, I was going to say Makaton's quite tricky with copyright, but I think that's actually.
Yeah, that's why Hayden produces all our visuals. He produces everything, so we didn't have that problem. And we could technically, but I think because it's a verb and it's an abstract thing, we really need to use what they use. And of course, I don't know how much Makaton is used in Australia with children on the spectrum.
It's very mixed. I always say as long as you're consistent. So it because really the reason we use signing for most of the children I work with is so that we've got consistent gesture, because adults can be confusing. One says toilet and jumps up and down, and one says toilet and holds their private parts. Whereas if we all just sign toilet, because hearing impaired children naturally develop gesture, whereas children with autism spectrum don't naturally learn to point or to use gesture as part of their communication. So I see signing more as us as adults as helping the child understand our words. So whether you use Makaton or as Auslan, it doesn't matter as long as we're consistent and as thinking of it as it's gesture. It's just a way to make sure that everyone, so if someone says it's time to go home, everyone signs home the same way. Yeah. Or if someone says that, we're finished, or pack away, but they're signing finish, as long as everyone's signing finish, your words can be pack away or line up. Or that's how I see it. It's like a way to
absolutely wonderful.
Help the child. So I like the idea of imagine or pretend, because I can actually see how that sometimes in the playground, some of my children find that confusing. So I can see this as a great skill. Sometimes my children will be like, I don't want to be the dog. I'm not a dog. And they can get upset. So I can see this is actually a really helpful skill that if we teach them about imagine or pretend using that sign, this is like a double thing they're going to learn from the book.
It is. And, there's a sort of misconception that children with autism don't have great imagination. That's social imagination. It's not creative imagination. Actually, we've got super creative imagination. So it's only the social imagination, the predicting what's going to happen next, that's a problem. But they've just been given this blanket cover, well, they can't do that. But actually, I found it was really easy. And these I'm showing you here so that your podcast leads will have to go online to have a look at it. So I had things like, let's imagine you're a very large giant. Pick up your pie, take long strides to where you need to be. So you go from one place to the other place like a giant, or you could be the penguin. Let's imagine you're a penguin. Put your arms
Oh my
down.
Goodness. I love that penguin that Haytham's made.
And the little pictures out there. I will do all of them so they can see. And let's choose one of the same. So there are 8 of them all together. So, the toddler. Let's imagine you're a toddler. Take teeny tiny wobbly steps to where you need to be. And that makes it fun. And you know what? I used to use this idea for my children if we were going to the swimming pool or if we were going into the hall we wouldn't do that. We'd imagine that we were, and we'd all go off jumping like a frog or whatever. And it's fun. And then, of course, because we know, don't we? You've got children on the autism spectrum, that transitions are trouble.
Yeah.
They always are, because that's when they get anxious. The minute they disengage the brain, so you put something else there, and now they're easily moving across.
And I love that another thing people can use, because if a child is moving like a giant to the hall, they're going to get that proprioceptual movement too, and that different movement of their body. So you could come up with some ways to move that is also helping them with their senses, which will help them regulate.
Yeah.
Dare I say, when I was at school, we used to do that marching. I'm sure some of the ADHD kids would have loved that marching to the hall.
So we used to salute, we'd have a salute, and then we'd go with our arms really doing that great marching and humming, some D'Souza.
I love it. But I love that. Tell Haytham, I love the pictures he's done for this. Thank you for getting this. I can't believe you're amazing. I send you a question and you've created these beautiful things for the podcast listeners. So anyone listening needs to jump on this episode, and I'll have it all as a download so they can just print it out, use it with their class or their family. And it's so many gorgeous things there. And I'll also put up the comparison of the pictures so people can see how the new book really is worth getting. And I mean, if they're like me, my old book was so loved, it was time to replace it anyway. So
good point, yes. Absolutely.
So thank you, Kay. That's fantastic.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and good luck to your podcast listeners with taming those little red beasts.
I love it. I love it. I hope you've got some great tips and strategies to make a difference. Remember, strategies wear out, and not every strategy works for everybody. If you're ready to dive in deeper to more strategies and ideas to make a difference, I'd highly recommend you consider Dr. Tony Attwood or my online courses. For more information, visit my website www.sulaki.com.au.